Okay, so you think you understand Disney. You've seen the movies. You've hummed the songs. Maybe you've stood in line for 3 hours at one of the parks, paid $14 for a bottle of water, and still somehow left feeling like it was worth it. Disney feels simple, familiar, even obvious. A movie company with a theme park and a mouse. Happy endings, fairy tales, and the occasional talking snowman. You are wrong. Disney is not a movie company. It is not a theme park company. It is not even, in the traditional sense, an entertainment company. What Disney actually is, underneath the castles and the musical scores and the princess dresses, is one of the most sophisticated intellectual property monetization machines ever built by human beings. And the way it makes money is so layered, so deliberately engineered, and so counterintuitive that most people who spend their entire lives as Disney customers never once see it clearly. So let's fix that. Because once you understand how Disney actually operates, you will never look at a movie poster, a theme park ticket, or a child's Halloween costume the same way again. Disney generated nearly $95 billion in revenue in fiscal year 2025. Let that number sit for a moment. $95 billion. That is more than the entire annual GDP of dozens of countries. Now here is where it gets genuinely interesting. The entertainment segment, movies, streaming, television, produces the largest share of gross revenue by division. But the segment with the highest operating profit margin is not entertainment. It is the experiences segment. Theme parks, resorts, and cruises. That division posted an operating margin of 27.6%. Entertainment managed 11. The division most people instinctively associate with Disney. The films, the storytelling, the creative magic, is, by the numbers, the least profitable part of the enterprise. The rides and the hotel rooms are carrying the financial weight. That is not an oversight. That is a business model that has been refined over 90 years. And to understand how it got here, you have to go back to a man who was nearly bankrupt and completely desperate. In the late 1920s, Walt Disney was running a studio that was genuinely on the edge. Hand-drawn animation was brutally expensive and labor-intensive. Film distributors absorbed enormous percentages of theatrical revenue, sometimes 50 cents of every dollar the box office generated. The Mickey Mouse cartoons were popular, but popular and profitable are two very different things. And Walt and his brother Roy were in a constant scramble for operating capital. There were payrolls to meet, distribution agreements that consistently favored the distributor over the animator. The studio existed in a state of chronic financial tension despite producing work that audiences genuinely loved. In 1930, a businessman offered Walt $300 for the right to stamp Mickey Mouse on children's writing tablets. Walt said yes, less because he understood the long-term potential of what he was agreeing to, and more because he needed the money immediately. The real structural transformation came in 1932 when Disney signed an exclusive licensing management agreement with Herman K. Kamen, a retail promotions executive who understood something Walt was only beginning to grasp. The characters themselves, not the films, not the distribution agreements, not the theater relationships, were the actual asset. Kamen reorganized the licensing operation and drove it across every consumer product category he could identify. In 1933, he arranged a deal with the Ingersoll-Waterbury Clock Company, a manufacturer on the edge of insolvency during the Great Depression. Ingersoll produced the first Mickey Mouse wristwatch priced at under $3. On the first day it went on sale at Macy's in New York City, 11,000 units sold in a single day. Within 8 weeks, demand forced Ingersoll to expand its manufacturing workforce from 300 employees to over 3,000, rescuing the entire enterprise from bankruptcy. By 1935, Ingersoll had paid Disney over $250,000 in licensing royalties on more than 2.5 million watches sold. Pause and absorb what actually happened. A cartoon character on the face of an inexpensive watch rescued a manufacturing company from the Great Depression and simultaneously generated $250,000 in royalty income for a film studio. The character was not in theaters. It was not being animated into anything new. It was simply existing as a legal trademark and generating cash every time someone bought a product that carried its image. By the late 1930s, licensing royalties were generating more net cash for Disney than its theatrical film revenues. That cash flow funded the production of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, a film so expensive by contemporary standards that Hollywood insiders called it Disney's folly, genuinely convinced it would bankrupt the studio, and finance the construction of the Burbank studio complex that still operates today. Character licensing did not emerge from Disney's financial success. It created that success. It was the engine beneath the fairy tale, humming steadily while everyone's attention was on the screen. This established the core economic principle that has governed the entire company for 90 years. The greatest asset Disney owns is not a soundstage, not a roller coaster, not even a film archive. It is the legal right to a character. And the emotional bond that character has formed with a global audience across generations. Intellectual property is the technical term. What it means in practice is this. Once you create a character that people genuinely love, you can license that character to manufacturers and retailers worldwide, collect a percentage of everything those partners sell, and repeat that process at near zero marginal cost, for as long as the copyright holds. Manufacturing a second unit of a physical product requires raw materials, labor, shipping, and storage. Licensing a character design to a second toy manufacturer requires a contract and a bank account to receive the royalty check. The cost difference between those two activities is the entire economic foundation of Disney's business. Disney's consumer products and licensing division generated $4.45 billion in revenue in fiscal year 2025 at an operating margin approaching 49%. That means nearly half of every dollar brought in by that division falls straight to operating income. No factories on Disney's balance sheet, no supply chain exposure, no inventory warehoused at the company's risk. Just a portfolio of legally protected marks and a percentage of the global economic activity generated every time a partner attaches those marks to something people want. The animated film Cars, released by Pixar in 2006, makes this asymmetry visible in striking terms. Cars generated a relatively modest $462 million in global box office revenue. A quiet performance by Pixar standards. Yet because the character designs mapped almost perfectly onto die-cast toy vehicles, Cars generated over $10 billion in global retail merchandise sales in its first 5 years alone. A film that underperformed at the box office became one of the most commercially productive intellectual properties in Disney's entire portfolio, measured by total downstream revenue. The movie was not the product, it was the invitation. Now you understand why the films are almost beside the financial point. But here is the critical nuance. The films are absolutely the point, just not in the way most people assume. And this insight unlocks something even deeper about how Disney manages its intellectual property over time. Unlike a physical product that wears out, a character trademark does not depreciate with use. In fact, it tends to appreciate. Mickey Mouse has been on t-shirts, watches, school bags, and coffee mugs for nearly 100 years. The brand value has not diminished with repetition. It has compounded. Every generation of children exposed to Mickey Mouse adds another layer of cultural permanence to the trademark, which increases the royalty rate. Disney can charge the next licensing partner, which increases the premium the character commands at retail, which increases the licensing fee the generation after that will pay. This is a form of asset appreciation that has no real parallel in traditional manufacturing or retail. A factory depreciates. Equipment wears out. A building requires maintenance. A trademark, actively managed and culturally sustained, can grow in value essentially without limit for as long as the law protects it and the culture continues to embrace it. A Marvel Cinematic Universe theatrical release is not primarily a film. In the broadest economic sense, it is a coordinated global product launch event that happens to play in cinemas. Months before the premiere date, toy manufacturers have already distributed action figures, role-play accessories, and costume sets to retail shelves worldwide. Video game publishers release tie-in titles. Clothing licensees stock shelves with character-branded apparel. Then the film premieres and the character enters the cultural bloodstream. Children know the name, the face, the costume, the catchphrase. The streaming platform releases a canonical spin-off series to sustain the character between theatrical installments. The theme park division integrates a new attraction. The Halloween costume goes on sale in August. The Lego set appears in the holiday catalog in October. One superhero. Dozens of simultaneous interconnected revenue streams. Every single one triggered by a single theatrical release that may or may not have turned a meaningful standalone profit. This is precisely what Disney paid $4 billion to acquire when it bought Marvel Entertainment in 2009. Not future box office receipts. A machine. A portfolio of over 5,000 comic book characters, each one a potential global product line, a potential theme park land, a potential streaming franchise, a potential costume sold to millions of children across multiple generations. Financial analysts at the time evaluated the deal relative to projected Marvel film revenues. That framework missed the point almost entirely. The Lucasfilm acquisition in 2012 at $4.05 billion operated on identical logic. Star Wars was 35 years old when the deal closed. The original theatrical run was history. Yet the franchise was generating hundreds of millions in annual consumer product revenues with remarkable consistency. Adults were buying lightsabers. Children were building Lego Millennium Falcons. Collectors were paying premium prices for limited edition figurines. Disney paid $4 billion for a franchise already 3.5 decades old and showing no meaningful signs of commercial exhaustion, because beloved stories, when actively maintained, do not expire, they compound. It is also worth understanding that Disney's commercial reach is not confined to the United States. This is a genuinely global operation. International theme park destinations in Paris, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Shanghai allow Disney to capture regional tourism and leisure spending at scale. These international properties contributed $1.44 billion in operating income in fiscal year 2025. Global box office distribution networks ensure that major theatrical releases premiere concurrently across dozens of markets, driving localized merchandise demand in each. Consumer product licensing offices in key markets tailor Disney character applications to local cultural preferences and retail landscapes. A character that resonates primarily with North American audiences through one product category may be adapted and licensed differently in the Japanese market or the European market, allowing Disney to extract maximum economic value from each IP asset within the specific cultural context of each consumer base. This global diversification is a meaningful structural advantage. A competitor whose primary revenue base is domestic is exposed to single-market economic cycles. Disney collects cash from theme park admissions in Tokyo, streaming subscriptions in London, consumer product royalties in Sao Paulo, and hotel stays in Shanghai, often simultaneously. A recession in one market does not compress revenue across all markets at once. The geographic diversification of the revenue base provides a layer of financial resilience that purely domestic media enterprises structurally cannot replicate. The Star Wars, Galaxy's Edge-themed environment constructed at Disneyland and Disney's Hollywood studios required capital expenditure well exceeding $1 billion. That is a staggering investment by any industry measure. But because the narrative world is continuously sustained through streaming series, film releases, video games, and publishing events, the physical infrastructure generates high-margin guest revenues on an essentially indefinite basis. The emotional bond to the intellectual property insulates the capital investment from typical asset depreciation. A $1 billion theme park land built around a beloved story does not age the way a roller coaster does. It deepens. Frozen, released in November 2013, illustrates this architecture operating at full commercial speed. The film earned $1.28 billion globally, an outstanding theatrical performance. But the real economic story has almost nothing to do with ticket sales. Within 12 months of the premiere, Disney Consumer Products had sold over 3 million Elsa and Anna costume dresses in North America alone. During the Halloween season of 2014, an estimated 2.6 million American children dressed as characters from the film, making Frozen the single most popular Halloween costume in the country that year. Total global retail merchandise sales from the Frozen franchise exceeded $6 billion, more than 4 times the film's entire worldwide box office gross. The merchandise operated on near-zero incremental creative cost because the creative investment had already been paid for by the film production budget. Every costume, every doll, every themed birthday decoration was essentially margin. The character designs were not accidental. The distinct color palette of Elsa's gown, the highly recognizable silhouettes, the musical sequences engineered to embed themselves permanently in a young child's long-term memory. All of it designed from the outset with consumer product application in mind. Disney knew exactly what it was building. It was building a brand. The film was the delivery mechanism, and the merchandise was the business. Now, if you're getting genuine value from this breakdown of how Disney actually makes its money, take a moment right now to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It makes a real difference in how many people find this kind of analysis. And there is a great deal more coming. The theme parks deserve their own examination because the economics there become almost philosophical. A standard amusement park competes on physical intensity. The coaster drops faster, the ride is longer, the spectacle is louder. Disney does not compete on those terms because Disney is not in the amusement business. It is in the immersion business when you walk into Fantasyland or into Pandora, the world of Avatar, or into Star Wars. Galaxy's Edge, you are not entering a collection of mechanical rides and queue areas. You are physically entering a story world that already exists inside your emotional memory. The park did not create that attachment. The film did, possibly decades before you ever visited. The park is simply the place where you get to step inside it, and that distinction is worth billions of dollars annually. This emotional architecture creates extraordinary pricing power. When an experience is categorically unique, when there is genuinely no alternative location where a visitor can live inside that specific story world, price sensitivity collapses. Families save for years before booking. They accept significant premium rates for on-site accommodations because the on-property experience is qualitatively different from anything available nearby. They accept ticket prices that have risen dramatically over recent decades without the demand destruction that would accompany equivalent price increases in almost any other consumer category. And the admission ticket is, by design, just the opening transaction. Once inside the park, the commercial environment is an integrated spending ecosystem engineered at every touchpoint. Character dining experiences convert standard meal times into paid interactive entertainment, commanding price premiums measured in multiples of typical restaurant costs. Priority access passes monetize the desire to skip queue times, turning wait management into a separate recurring revenue line. In-park merchandise, themed accessories, wands, costume elements, collectible pins available exclusively within specific parklands, creates genuine scarcity and purchase urgency that cannot be replicated at retail. On-ride photography systems capture moments automatically and sell the images back through digital subscription packages. For most families visiting a Disney property, the base admission ticket represents well under half of total daily spending inside the park. The ticket is the cover charge. The park is the mechanism for everything that follows. Demand-based calendar pricing means a single-day admission on a peak holiday weekend costs materially more than the same ticket on an off-peak weekday in January. Mandatory park reservation systems create controlled capacity constraints that drive advanced booking behavior months ahead of the visit. The system operates with the yield management precision of an airline reservation platform, except instead of selling seats, it is selling access to a dreamscape that no competitor can replicate. And it works because of a specific, well-documented feature of human psychology that Disney understands better than almost any company on Earth. When parents are purchasing experiences for their children, especially experiences framed as irreplaceable family milestones, price inelasticity approaches its theoretical maximum. A parent who would negotiate carefully over a household purchase will spend several $100s on a character dining reservation without meaningful hesitation, because the alternative is a child's visible disappointment on what was supposed to be a magical day. Disney does not manufacture this psychology. It identifies it precisely and builds an entire commercial infrastructure on top of it. Disney Plus operates inside the same logic, and it is misunderstood by most of the business press coverage it receives. The platform, launched in November 2019, reached over 100 million subscribers faster than any streaming service in history. And by fiscal year 2025, the combined Disney Plus and Hulu segment was generating $1.33 billion in operating income, having shifted from early losses to meaningful profitability. Those numbers dominate the headlines. They miss what the platform is actually doing inside the corporate system. Disney Plus is not primarily a streaming business. It is a continuous engagement engine for every other part of the Disney ecosystem. Between theatrical releases, it keeps characters alive in household daily routines through canonical series, spin-off content, and short-form programming for the youngest audiences. Every hour a child spends watching a Disney Plus original set inside a story world they love is an hour of active brand reinforcement, effective advertising for the theme park attraction, the consumer product line, and the next theatrical release. The platform simultaneously generates first-party behavioral data at scale, which characters resonate with which demographics, which formats drive the deepest engagement. And that intelligence flows directly into the marketing infrastructure across every business segment. Disney's preference for sequels, live-action remakes, and franchise extensions over original IP development reflects the same economic discipline. Every unproven original film requires massive capital investment with no guaranteed audience adoption and no pre-built merchandise demand. A sequel carries a predictable revenue floor, lower marketing friction, pre-allocated retail shelf space, and a consumer products machine that activates automatically. The creative critics of this approach are not wrong. The artistic trade-offs are real. But they are applying an aesthetic standard to a corporation that is, fundamentally, operating a finely tuned economic model. And on the model's own terms, the strategy is rational. Disney's vulnerabilities are real and worth naming. The linear cable television business is in accelerating structural decline, compressing the high-margin affiliate fee revenues that historically subsidized content investment. ESPN faces rising sports rights costs even as traditional pay TV subscriber counts fall. The debt from the $71.3 billion acquisition of 21st Century Fox requires ongoing capital allocation to service. The fixed operating costs of the park and cruise fleet create financial drag during macroeconomic shocks. The COVID period illustrated all of these vulnerabilities simultaneously. The diversification that normally provides resilience proved insufficient against a shock that compressed physical and experiential consumer behavior at the same time. But under normal conditions, the diversification provides genuine structural protection. When park attendance softens, streaming engagement tends to rise. When theatrical revenues disappoint, licensing royalties continue regardless of box office outcomes. The segments do not move in lockstep, which gives Disney a financial resilience that single-sector media competitors structurally cannot match. There is one more element of Disney's economic model that rarely gets the attention it deserves: the compounding value of nostalgia across generations. When a child forms a genuine emotional bond with a Disney character, that bond does not dissolve when childhood ends. It transforms. A 35-year-old who watched The Lion King in theaters as a child takes their own children to the live-action remake and buys the new merchandise for them. A 40-year-old who grew up watching Star Wars in the 1980s purchases a high-end adult collectible figurine they would never have been able to afford as a child. A parent who loved Cinderella introduces the film to their daughter and then books a Cinderella-themed character dining experience at the park. In corporate strategy terms, this is called multi-generational customer lifetime value. The original customer acquisition cost, paid once, during the theatrical marketing campaign, possibly 40 years ago, yields continuous revenue returns across a span of time that no single product company can match. Disney does not have to reacquire these customers in the traditional marketing sense. They self-recruit the next generation from within their own families. A child raised by a Disney-loving parent becomes, with high statistical probability, a Disney-loving parent themselves. The brand propagates itself through the most trusted social channel that exists. The relationship between parent and child, this generational compounding is why Disney's seemingly mature, decades-old franchises continue to command billion-dollar capital investments. A new theme park land built around a 40-year-old story is not a nostalgia project. It is a calculated bet on a consumer relationship that has been proven durable across multiple family generations, backed by a streaming platform that actively sustains the story world and household routines, and a consumer products machine that keeps the characters present in daily life throughout childhood. Through all of it, the acquisitions, the streaming pivot, the park expansions, the licensing arrangements, the underlying mechanism Walt Disney sketched on a corporate diagram in 1957 has never fundamentally changed. A creative studio produces a film. The film generates characters. Those characters populate theme parks, licensing agreements, consumer product lines, streaming platforms, live entertainment events, and interactive gaming franchises. The revenues generated across all of those downstream businesses fund new creative investment, which generates new characters, which populates new parks and product lines and streaming content. Each business segment feeds energy back into every other part of the system. Each dollar earned in one area lowers the cost of earning the next dollar somewhere else. The flywheel has been spinning continuously since Snow White premiered in theaters in 1937. With every acquisition, every platform expansion, and every new generation of customers, the system has become more integrated, more efficient, and more difficult for any competitor to meaningfully replicate. Netflix can produce a hit series. Universal can build an impressive themed environment. Amazon can distribute merchandise through its logistics network. But none of them can yet activate all those revenue streams simultaneously, from a single creative release, sustained across multiple generations of the same family, reinforced by nearly a century of accumulated brand trust and emotional equity that no marketing budget alone can manufacture. Consider what it would actually take to replicate what Disney has built. You would need decades of theatrical releases that generate genuine intergenerational emotional loyalty. You would need a global network of owned and licensed theme park destinations capable of converting that emotional loyalty into high-margin physical experiences. You would need a direct-to-consumer streaming platform with enough proprietary content to sustain daily household engagement across every age demographic. You would need a consumer products licensing infrastructure with established relationships across toy manufacturers, apparel makers, and specialty retailers in dozens of countries. You would need cruise ships. You would need a live entertainment division. You would need the trust of parents across cultures and generations, built through decades of consistent brand management. No competitor today is close to assembling all of those elements. And even if one attempted to, it would require decades of patient capital deployment, during which Disney continues to compound the advantage it already holds. The moat is not just wide. It is actively widening. That integrated capability, not any individual film, park, or character, is Disney's actual competitive advantage. The machine itself, and its proven capacity to turn human imagination into generational economic value. Before you go, Make sure you check out the business guide linked in the description and pinned in the first comment below. It covers business models, strategic frameworks, and the economic principles behind how successful companies actually operate at scale. Worth reading if this kind of analysis resonates with you. The next time you watch a Disney movie, remember, you may just be seeing the very first step in a business strategy worth hundreds of billions of dollars. A single creative act that, if it connects with an audience, will generate revenue for the next 4 decades across merchandise, streaming, theme parks, licensing, live events, and consumer products your grandchildren may one day purchase. If you found this video genuinely valuable, please like it and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It makes a real difference to this channel, and there is a lot more of this coming. Thanks for watching.